It's interesting, they have this idea, the younger generation, maybe every generation does, that just because something is new makes it better. And that's not true. New is not synonymous with better.
But you're sounding like an old-fashioned conservative.
Okay.
And the left,
Yes.
you know, decries you, and then the left likes you when you say something bad about Trump.
And this is one of our big problems, is that we're all in our bubbles. We are all in our media bubbles, and so many people just want to hear coming back to them what they already believe in an echo chamber. You mentioned Ronald Reagan. Famously, he used to have a drink at the end of the day, often with Tip O'Neill, who was the leader in the House and the Democrat. But they were just two Irish pals who could get together and have a scotch at the end of the day. And they knew they weren't going to get along on many issues, but they didn't hate each other. They could drink together. That is inconceivable today. Can you imagine Joe Biden having a drink with Mike Johnson?
Bill Maher just dropped the mic, and it's got the internet on fire. After weeks of getting dragged by the left for daring to meet with Donald Trump, Maher has finally clapped back. And trust us, it wasn't subtle. In a brutal, no-holds-barred monologue, the legendary comedian scorched his haters for their hypocrisy, their performative progressivism, and their growing intolerance for open dialogue. This wasn't just a response, it was a roast, and it left scorch marks. And yes, we've got every blazing moment lined up for you. So buckle up, grab the popcorn, and let's roll the clips.
So I'm going to call it out wherever I see it. I mean, there are things that have to do with, you know, gender and race and free speech and just ideas about, you know, you can be healthy at any weight, and gender is always a social construct, and maybe we should give communism another try, and maybe we should get rid of capitalism and the border patrol, and let's tear down statues of Lincoln and get rid of the police. Just, you know, no. It's not that I've gotten old, it's that your ideas are stupid, okay?
Common sense is still common sense.
Yes, common sense is common sense, and I'm going to call it out wherever it is on the spectrum.
Maher's opening salvo landed squarely on the far-left hardliners, the very ones screeching that he'd betrayed the cause by daring to sit down with their arch-nemesis Donald Trump. But instead of groveling or offering some half-baked apology, Maher hit back with cold, hard truth. Their actions and policies no longer align with basic common sense or reality. And he didn't sugarcoat it. He called out the ideological purity tests, the cancel culture mob mentality, and the suffocating groupthink that's taken over the so-called progressive wing. It was direct, unapologetic, and devastating. You could practically hear the gasps from the echo chamber. These activists were expecting a kumbaya moment, a reaffirmation of the progressive pact. But what they got instead was a verbal flamethrower. Maher came armed with receipts, logic, and a flamethrower of truth. The takedown was fast, brutal, and long overdue.
Well, I think the basis of it is we started to hate each other. I mean, you mentioned Ronald Reagan. Famously, he used to have a drink at the end of the day, often with Tip O'Neill, who was the leader in the House and the Democrat. But they were just two Irish pals who could get together and have a scotch at the end of the day. And they knew they weren't going to get along on many issues, but they didn't hate each other. They could drink together. That is inconceivable today. Can you imagine Joe Biden having a drink with Mike Johnson? It just would never happen. When you hate people, you don't listen to them. So it doesn't matter how reasonable they might be.
Yeah, I've got to say, I'm with Maher on this one. Sure, polarization exists on both sides of the aisle, but the left's version of it, it's downright exhausting. We're talking about a level of ideological rigidity that's become borderline cultish. I mean, remember when some progressive women publicly declared they wouldn't date men who voted for Trump, not disagree with them, refuse to date them? That's not political activism, that's dating with a purity test. And just a few weeks ago, I showed you that wild clip of a young woman calling off her wedding, yes, wedding, because her fiance didn't have a strong opinion on LGBTQ rights or Black Lives Matter. He didn't oppose them, he just wasn't vocal enough, and that alone made him problematic. This isn't just politics anymore, it's moral absolutism dressed up as virtue.
They're wrong. I mean, they're wrong, and the kids are crazy. It's interesting, they have this idea, the younger generation, maybe every generation does, that just because something is new makes it better. And that's not true. New is not synonymous with better.
But you're sounding like an old-fashioned conservative.
Okay. I heard a couple of people say, or maybe they wrote it online, that, well, I'm a hypocrite because you were for the demonstrators in 1968 or whatever it was when they were demonstrating against the Vietnam War. Yeah, that was very different. First of all, the students weren't against their own. These students were threatening other students. That didn't happen in the Vietnam War. And being against the Vietnam War made sense. It was a war that we probably should not have been in.
But let me ask you,
this is demonstrating and protesting for a terrorist group. I mean, Hamas is...
Well, to be fair, a lot of students aren't doing that. There are a lot of outside, people have mixed together.
Comparing the Vietnam War to what's happening in Palestine right now is like comparing apples to hand grenades. It just doesn't hold up. I genuinely wonder how people fail to see the difference. The Vietnam War was a misguided, unnecessary conflict that America had no business being in. So when Maher supported the anti-war demonstrators back then, it made perfect sense. It was a stand against pointless American interventionism. But today, we're talking about Hamas, a terrorist organization that deliberately targets civilians and unleashes barbaric violence on Israel. And yet, some people actually expected Maher to back them, to endorse that kind of bloodshed. And because he doesn't support terrorists, they call him a hypocrite? Give me a break. That's not principled activism. They're just mad he's not parroting their agenda.
Well, I've been moaning and railing about that on my show because I tore Merrick Garland a new one a couple of weeks ago because I think the Democrats blew it, as they always do with this kind of stuff, because they've had 4 years. What was all the delay about? Why are we coming to the end? Of course they're going to try to run out the clock, and they did. And so if this is the only one, the one they probably shouldn't have brought anyway, or if they did, it was really a election law violation trial that should have been tried nationally on a federal level, and it wound up to be falsifying business records on the state level. So it's already in the wrong court. And why didn't Garland bring this earlier federally? Or why aren't any of these being wrapped up in 4 years? It's just so ridiculous.
As expected, Bill Maher didn't hold back. He took a blowtorch to the Democratic Party, ripping into their failures and cowardice throughout the Biden presidency. See, many Democrats have been quick to point fingers at Maher, blaming him for their electoral losses. Why? Because he dared to tell the truth, because he refuses to blindly toe the party line. They argue that his relentless criticism of the far left alienated the base and sowed disunity within the ranks. But Maher wasn't having it. He reminded them forcefully that it wasn't his truth bombs that doomed them at the ballot box. It was their own arrogance, their out-of-touch policies, and their refusal to listen to everyday Americans. He didn't cost them votes. Their own extremism did, and that's the pill they just can't swallow. Maher is simply the mirror reflecting their mess, and they hate him for it. Instead of doing the hard work of course correction, they lash out at the messenger. But here's the thing, when the left eats its own, the only winners are the ones they claim to oppose. Even when his old pal, Larry David, criticized him for dining with Trump, Maher didn't let it slide.
Nobody has been harder about and more prescient, I must say, about Donald Trump than me. I don't need to be lectured on who Donald Trump is. Just to use the Hitler thing, first of all, I just think it's kind of insulting to 6 million dead Jews, like that should kind of be in its own place in history. And, I know people can say, well, we're just comparing it in this way. Well, it's an argument you kind of lost just to start it.
Absolutely. Comparing anyone to Hitler isn't just reckless, it's downright insulting. Hitler stands alone in history for the sheer scale of evil he unleashed. The horrors he inflicted on the Jewish people and the world at large aren't comparable to any modern political figure, no matter how controversial. To casually throw around that comparison cheapens the suffering of millions and dilutes the gravity of what actually happened. Bill Maher made it clear he thought Larry David's attacks were completely over the line. He didn't just disagree, he found them lazy, emotionally charged, and lacking in intellectual honesty. In Maher's view, if David had an axe to grind, he should have aimed it at someone else. This wasn't criticism, it was character assassination disguised as moral outrage, and Maher wasn't going to let that slide.
This is why, I really feel like one of the themes of the book is, and in my show all the time, I'm just saying, you can hate Trump, you can't hate everybody who likes him. It's half the country, okay? And look, no one was harder on Trump or will be harder on Trump, and I think I was out front on predicting he was not going to leave office. But you can't change people's minds like that. Sometimes they just like a guy, and I also concede that there are so much goofiness also on the left,
right,
that I do understand why people go, yeah, Trump is crazy and we don't really like him, but you know what? What you're selling scares me even more.
It's honestly sad and a bit frustrating that the left still can't recognize the error of its ways, let alone correct course. Bill Maher has long described himself as a normie, someone politically grounded in the middle. He used to proudly identify as a liberal, but over time, he's admitted he no longer recognizes the modern left, so he's shifted toward the center. At least, that's how he frames it. But let's be real, some of us think he's already inching closer to the right. Remember, Maher used to be ruthless when taking down conservatives. No mercy, no filter. These days though, his criticism of the right has softened noticeably, while his firepower is almost entirely aimed at the left. Some say it's just house cleaning, calling out his own side in hopes of saving it. But others, myself included, believe his ideological compass is clearly swinging rightward. And if this trend continues, it may only be a matter of time before Maher fully crosses over to the conservative side, not out of allegiance, but because the left left him.
And the left,
Yes.
you know, decries you, and then the left likes you when you say something bad about Trump.
And this is one of our big problems, is that we're all in our bubbles. We are all in our media bubbles, and so many people just want to hear coming back to them what they already believe in an echo chamber.
Most America is in the center, but you don't see that in the media.
Yes, you don't see much of this in the mainstream media, and there's a reason for that. The media landscape has, unfortunately, become deeply polarized, with many major outlets jumping aboard the Democratic bandwagon. Instead of reporting with balance or nuance, they've chosen sides. The result? Endless praise for their political allies, and relentless, often exaggerated criticism for the opposition. That's why it was particularly striking to hear Anderson Cooper address this issue, because let's be honest, CNN has been one of the biggest culprits. Since the moment Donald Trump descended that escalator in 2015, CNN has operated like an anti-Trump war room. Objectivity took a back seat to outrage, and journalism became activism. For years, they've pushed narratives that fuel division while pretending to be the voice of reason. Even Maher had to call them out for it on his show.
You were on Stephen Colbert's show, and he said something like, you guys at CNN just report the news straight. And the crowd burst into laughter. Look, I'm on CNN now. I guess we're on it right now. I mean, they show this show the next night. I don't know how we get away with it with all the but they do.
If Cooper's finally acknowledging that, it's a long overdue reckoning, and maybe, just maybe, a sign that even the most entrenched media voices are starting to question the monster they helped create. But let's face it, as long as Donald Trump holds any political power, honest and objective reporting from networks like CNN and MSNBC isn't happening anytime soon. Why? Because their disdain for him goes far beyond politics. These outlets didn't just oppose Trump after he took office. They pre-hated him. They were against him before day one, before a single policy was implemented, before he even took the oath. And that hatred hasn't cooled. If anything, it's intensified. Instead of covering stories with journalistic integrity, they consistently frame every headline, every segment, every panel discussion with a heavy anti-Trump bias. It's not reporting, it's narrative crafting. They twist facts, omit context, and rely on emotional buzzwords to keep their audience in a perpetual state of fear and outrage. At this point, it's not journalism, it's an ideological echo chamber dressed up as news. Maybe Bill Maher isn't shifting right. He's standing firm while the left drifts further into ideological extremism. His blunt honesty, once celebrated, now offends the very crowd that used to cheer him on. He's not afraid to call out hypocrisy, even if it means burning bridges with old allies. The media may refuse to see it, and critics may lash out, but Maher's message is clear. Truth doesn't come with a political label, and as long as outrage mobs keep ruling the narrative, voices like his, unfiltered, fearless, and inconvenient, will remain not just necessary, but absolutely vital. And this draws the curtains on today's video. If you enjoyed it, then hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.